There's a moment that happens when an old song comes on the radio. You're driving somewhere ordinary, thinking about grocery lists or tomorrow's meetings, and then those first few notes hit. Your chest tightens with something that isn't quite sadness, but isn't happiness either. You're suddenly 17 again, sitting in your best friend's car after graduation, believing the whole world was waiting for you. Or you're 8 years old in your grandmother's kitchen, watching her hands fold dough while sunlight streams through windows that no longer exist. You might think you're just remembering the past, but here's the truth. You're doing something far more complex. You're time traveling with your heart, trying to touch something that can never be touched again. This isn't simple memory. This is nostalgia, and it carries both the gift of connection and the weight of impossible longing. Inside your mind lives a sophisticated time machine that operates without your permission. Think of nostalgia not as remembering, but as emotional archaeology. You're not just recalling events. You're excavating feelings, digging through layers of experience to find moments that still pulse with life. This is what psychologists call self-continuity. It's your brain's way of creating a thread that connects who you were to who you are now. Without this thread, you'd be a collection of disconnected moments rather than a coherent person moving through time. But here's where it gets interesting. Your memory isn't a video recorder. It's an editor with a very specific agenda. Your brain automatically softens the sharp edges of the past while preserving its golden moments. The fight you had with your father gets blurred, but the way he taught you to ride a bike stays crystal clear. The loneliness of high school fades, but the feeling of belonging at that one party remains vivid. This isn't deception, it's survival. Your mind is protecting you from the full weight of every painful moment while keeping the experiences that shaped your sense of who you can become. Temporal discounting explains why yesterday always feels simpler than today. The past is a finished story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. You know how it turned out. You survived it. The uncertainty that made it difficult to live through has been replaced by the comfort of knowing how it all worked out. The present, by contrast, is unwritten, uncertain, full of variables you can't control and outcomes you can't predict. No wonder your mind keeps drifting backward to times when the story was complete. Nostalgia becomes an existential buffer against the anxiety of an uncertain future. When today feels overwhelming and tomorrow feels unpredictable, yesterday offers the comfort of a known quantity. You may not have been happier then, but you were someone who figured it out, who made it through, who survived to tell the story. The physical response reveals how deep this goes. Certain scents can transport you instantly because smell bypasses your logical brain and goes straight to the limbic system, where memories and emotions intertwine. The cologne your first love wore, the specific detergent your mother used, the way autumn air smelled in the town where you grew up. These triggers create a kind of emotional time collapse. Past and present merge in your nervous system, and for a moment, the boundaries between then and now dissolve completely. Your body responds as if the memory is happening right now. Your heart rate changes, your breathing shifts. Tears come without warning, not because you're sad, but because you're feeling the full weight of time itself. This is why nostalgia feels so much more intense than regular remembering. You're not just thinking about the past, you're experiencing it again, filtered through everything you've learned since then. The cruel beauty is that you can never actually return to those moments. You can only visit them as the person you are now, carrying all the knowledge and loss that came after. The 17-year-old listening to that song in the car is gone forever, but the feeling of infinite possibility they carried lives on in your chest, activated by 3 minutes of melody. Nostalgia isn't weakness or self-indulgence. It's your soul's way of maintaining connection to all the versions of yourself you've ever been. It's how you stay whole across time, even as everything around you changes. But here's where the architecture gets complex. This beautiful system that connects you to your history can also trap you there. But nostalgia isn't just personal, it's also collective, and that's where it gets even more complex. You've felt it scrolling through social media. The posts about how music was better in the 90s, or kids used to play outside more. The vintage filters that make today's photos look like yesterday's memories. The shared longing for decades you might not have even lived through. This is collective nostalgia, and it operates on a completely different level than personal memory. Entire generations convinced themselves that some previous era was the golden age of human experience. The 50s were simpler, the 80s were more authentic. The 70s had better music. Every decade becomes a promised land that existed just before you were old enough to appreciate it. But here's the strange thing. The people who actually lived through those decades were busy longing for the decades that came before them. Your parents weren't walking around in the 80s thinking, this is the golden age. They were probably nostalgic for the 60s, just like their parents missed the 40s. This is what psychologists call the golden age fallacy. Every generation believes the past was better because they're comparing their current struggles to a sanitized version of history that never actually existed. Social media amplifies this collective myth-making in ways we're only beginning to understand. The algorithm feeds you content designed to trigger nostalgic feelings because nostalgia keeps you scrolling. That video of kids playing in the street in 1975. That photo of a family dinner without phones. That post about how people used to talk to strangers. These images create a shared fantasy about a time when life was more connected, more meaningful, more real. But they're showing you highlight reels from the past, just like Instagram shows you highlight reels from the present. You start to believe in borrowed memories from movies and music and stories. You feel nostalgic for the small town portrayed in films you loved, even though you grew up in the suburbs. You long for the romance of handwritten letters, even though you've never actually maintained a correspondence that way. This aesthetic nostalgia becomes a form of identity. You wear vintage band t-shirts for groups that broke up before you were born. You decorate your apartment with objects that reference decades you never experienced. You curate a version of yourself that's connected to a past that isn't actually yours. The comfort of these borrowed memories is real, but it's also dangerous. When you're constantly measuring today against an idealized yesterday that never existed, the present will always disappoint you. You start to believe that authenticity lives in the past, that real connection happened before social media, that people were happier when life was simpler. That meaning existed more fully in previous generations. But here's the truth about collective nostalgia. It's not really about the past. It's about the present feeling overwhelming and the future feeling uncertain. When the world feels too complex, too fast, too disconnected, your mind reaches for stories about times when things made more sense. When families ate dinner together every night. When neighbors knew each other's names. When people weren't glued to screens. These stories serve a function. They give you a vision of what human connection could look like. They remind you of values that matter. They point toward ways of being that feel more authentic than the rushed, digital, fragmented experience of modern life. The problem comes when you mistake the story for the solution. When you spend so much time longing for a mythical past that you stop building the connection you actually need in the present. Collective nostalgia can inspire you to create the kind of life you're nostalgic for, or it can trap you in endless comparison to a standard that never actually existed. The difference lies in how you hold the feeling. But there's a darker side to this beautiful mechanism. Sometimes nostalgia stops being a bridge to your history and becomes a place where you get stuck. You know this feeling. You're scrolling through old photos at 2 a.m., not because they bring you joy, but because they offer escape from whatever you're avoiding in the present moment. The breakup you can't process. The job that's draining your soul. The version of yourself you've become that doesn't match the person you thought you'd be. The past becomes a hiding place from the work of being alive right now. This is when nostalgia transforms from connection into avoidance. Instead of using memories to understand who you are, you use them to escape who you've become. Instead of letting the past inform your present choices, you let it replace the need to make any choices at all. You start measuring today's reality against yesterday's highlight reel. Your current relationship gets compared to the honeymoon phase of a previous one. Your present job gets measured against the potential you felt in college. Your actual life gets weighed against the dreams you had when everything still seemed possible. This comparison trap is particularly cruel because you're not comparing like to like. You're comparing today's behind-the-scenes struggle with yesterday's carefully curated memories. The fight you had with your partner this morning against the perfect date you remember from 5 years ago. The stress of your current responsibilities against the freedom you felt during summer vacation when you were 12. The past wins every time because it's been edited by time and distance into its most palatable form. Relationship nostalgia becomes especially toxic. You stay attached to who someone used to be, rather than accepting who they are now. You keep waiting for your friend to become as fun as they were in college. You hold on to the version of your ex that existed during the first 3 months you dated. You expect your parents to show up the way they did during that one perfect family vacation. But people change. Circumstances evolve. The person you fell in love with, the friend who understood you perfectly, the parent who seemed to have all the answers, they were real in that moment, but that moment is gone. Trying to resurrect dead versions of living people is a form of emotional necromancy that serves no one. The grief beneath nostalgia runs deeper than missing specific people or places. You're mourning lost versions of yourself, the person who believed anything was possible, the one who felt safe in the world, the version of you that existed before disappointment taught you to lower your expectations. This grief is necessary and natural, but it becomes problematic when it prevents you from meeting who you are now with curiosity and compassion. When you spend so much energy mourning who you used to be that you can't appreciate who you're becoming. Some people become archaeologists of their own memories, constantly digging through the past looking for evidence of who they really are. They collect stories about their former selves like artifacts, building shrines to versions of themselves that no longer exist. The exhaustion is real. Living in the past while trying to move forward is like driving while constantly looking in the rearview mirror. You can't navigate what's ahead of you when your attention is fixed on what's behind you. The comfort prison of nostalgia offers the illusion of safety while actually keeping you trapped. It feels easier to retreat into memories of when life made sense than to face the uncertainty of creating meaning in the present moment. But here's what the prison doesn't tell you. The past you're longing for was once an uncertain present that someone had to navigate without a map. The courage you're nostalgic for, the boldness of your younger self, the clarity you remember having, the sense of possibility that once felt infinite, those qualities didn't come from the past. They came from someone brave enough to engage fully with their present moment, whatever that moment contained. The healing doesn't begin with rejecting nostalgia or pretending the past doesn't matter. It begins with understanding that nostalgic feelings are information, not instruction. When that old song hits and your chest tightens with longing, pause. What is that feeling actually telling you? Not that you should go back, but that something from that time still matters to your soul. Maybe it's the sense of possibility you carried then. Maybe it's the connection you felt to something larger than yourself. Maybe it's the version of you that existed before you learned to be afraid. This is nostalgic wisdom rather than nostalgic longing. The difference is crucial. Longing says, I want to go back. Wisdom says, I want to carry forward what was beautiful about that time. You can't recreate the exact circumstances of your past, but you can identify the essence of what made those moments meaningful and find ways to cultivate that essence in your present life. If you're nostalgic for childhood summers, maybe what you're really missing is unstructured time and the freedom to be curious. You can't be 8 years old again, but you can create space in your adult life for wonder and exploration. If you're longing for the intimacy you felt with old friends, maybe what you're actually craving is the vulnerability and authenticity that mark those relationships. You can't resurrect those exact friendships, but you can bring that same openness to the connections available to you now. The practice becomes one of extraction rather than recreation. Instead of trying to rebuild the past, you extract its gifts and plant them in the soil of your present moment. This requires what psychologists call integration, taking the scattered pieces of your history and weaving them into a coherent narrative that serves your growth rather than your stagnation. Grateful remembering replaces escapist yearning. You honor what was without being imprisoned by it. You let the past inform your present choices without letting it dictate them. The goal isn't to stop feeling nostalgic. The goal is to use nostalgia as a compass that points toward your deepest values and most authentic desires. To let it remind you of who you've always been beneath all the adaptations and compromises. When you feel that familiar ache for yesterday, ask yourself, what am I really missing? What quality of experience am I longing for? How can I honor that longing by creating something beautiful in my life right now? The past becomes a teacher rather than a destination, a source of wisdom rather than a place of refuge. Your obsession with nostalgia isn't weakness or an inability to live in the present. It's your soul's sophisticated way of maintaining continuity across time, of staying connected to all the versions of yourself you've ever been. The courage isn't in forgetting where you came from or pretending the past doesn't matter. It's in using your history as a foundation for building something new, rather than as a destination where you want to remain. Your connection to yesterday is part of what makes you beautifully, completely human.